Call the meeting to order.
Meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Seeger.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Nugent. Trustee Johnson. Trustee Renucci.
Here.
Trustee Smalley.
Here.
And Trustee Wisniewski.
Here.
Thank you.
I am going to skip citizen participation and consent agenda and move on to item 1 for miscellaneous business, presentation of 2021 audit. We have conflicting meetings for the individuals that are conducting that meeting, so I want to make sure they're ahead of schedule for everything. So the floor is yours.
Okay, appreciate that. Introductions, and thank you for allowing us to do this remotely. My name is Kevin Krasinski, audit partner from Johnson Block, and I believe Hoy is here. We have, I'm going to give a brief overview. What we've got here is a summary, one-page overview. What I usually like to do is just explain a little bit of what the content is included within the audit report itself. We're independent auditors. Our role and responsibility is to give an opinion to ensure that the financial statements that you prepare are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So our report is unmodified, which means it is, you followed acceptable accounting principles. The format of the report is going to be similar to most, and it's prescribed by, government accounting standards. There's a section called management discussion and analysis, and that usually has a summary of the significant transactions throughout there. The fund financial statements are probably what you may, most likely are most interested in, and it gives the overview in terms of what happens within the different fund types that you have. And you've got several different fund types. The governmental funds, which includes your general fund, your TIF district, your debt service funds. Those are included and follow what they call the modified accrual basis of accounting, which measures the current assets and current liabilities. Long-term items are excluded on there. You also have business type funds, which for you, it's the water utility, the sewer fund, and airport. It's called business type funds because they follow the accounting principles outlined by businesses, which is a full accrual basis of accounting. The major differences between the two, the governmental funds and the business type funds. On governmental funds, debt proceeds and the expenditures to pay off the debt are recorded as, a financing source and an expenditure in the governmental funds. The capital assets, you'll have your capital projects fund will show an outlay and an expenditure in the governmental funds, but in the business type funds in your water and sewer, when you incur significant fixed asset costs, what you have is an increase in an asset, and that asset cost is depreciated over time, over the useful life. So those are the two major differences in accounting. There are a few others, but that's the most significant type. You also have government-wide financial statements, and those are consolidated financial statements. All of the governmental funds get consolidated into a governmental activities column, and then that also follows the full accrual basis of accounting. So those items that aren't recorded in the similar way as on business type funds, they're recorded that way on the governmental activities. It follows the full accrual basis of accounting. Probably the biggest section within the financial statements themselves is the footnotes. You have a summary of significant accounting policies and then all of the major transaction areas: cash, receivables, debt, fund equity, your pension plans, your capital assets. That there's footnotes that are included within there that provide a little bit more in-depth data regarding the numbers that are included within the financial statements themselves. So that provides, pretty much the content of the reports. I mean, following the footnotes, there is some, budget to actual information, and then there's some combining funds for some of the smaller funds that are lumped into, into the financial statements that come up in the front. We also have, what we have a required audit communication that goes in there. And then what that has is, there's some general communications that we need to do, but we also provide our management letter comments, and, our comments, there really isn't anything new that we've had in there. I mean, we've got a comment on, we do have, when we come in there and provide the audit for the village, we provide audit. We take a look at the transactions that you have, and oftentimes we propose audit adjustments. And we've had audit adjustments that we've given to you, which usually revolves around plant additions, and truing up depreciation items on some of the things. And we went over that with village staff. And I know that, last year was, I think it was the first year in your new accounting system. You had, some not issues, but it's just whenever you go into a new accounting system, it takes some time to, get the capital assets and all that taken care of. And I think for the most part, that process went pretty smooth. But, some of the other comments were on the internal accounting controls. This comment is pretty much based on your size. You're never going to get full segregation of duties, and there is some overlap between the billing, utility billing, and cash receipting function, and utility receipting function that's there. So we just pointed that out. And then the final comment that we had on there was just there's a new lease standard that will be in place next year. So anything that you have a lease in which you're a lessor or a lessee on, we will probably need to take a look at those, and there'll be new accounting requirements for there. So what we're recommending, at least for, is that the communities get background of what existing leases they have. Just key financial results. The general fund balance, it decreased by $178,000 last year. That's not any cause for alarm. I mean, actually, your general fund did very well. There was a write-off of an airport advance that was on the books for a long time, and that contributed to that. And then there was also a transfer over to set up a CDA fund. Though, without those two, you would have had a positive increase in the fund balance. And one of the things that we always like to take a look at is in terms of, when you're evaluating how the community is doing from a financial perspective, is to see what the unassigned fund balance is in relation to your budget. And your unassigned fund balance is about 43% of the expenditures and transfers in there. So it's healthy. I mean, I think the financial, I would say, rule of thumb is to try and look at 20 to 25%. That's usually where I see a lot of municipalities want to have theirs, and yours is greater than that. The water utility had a positive operating income, had a decrease in cash flow, but that was just related to some capital additions that had occurred. The sewer cash flow increased, but you had a borrowing associated with, and some debt proceeds there. And I think the final comment that I just, always, trying to wrap things up, is take a look at what your debt capacity is. And governments have got, 20, for your village has got about a $20 million general obligation debt limit, which is 5% of the equalized tax base within the community. And the debt that counts towards that limit is $6.5 million. So you've got a very good cushion there. So those were the, quick highlights. We've got, I know I'm often asked, I do a lot of these presentations, so I've, asked whether we want the hour-long version, the 20-minute version, or the 5 to 7 minute one, and that was my 5 to 7 minute overview. So
That sounded great, Kevin. Thank you.
Hey, Kevin, this is Matt Johnson. I just had two quick questions. So did I hear you correctly on the general fund change that the bulk of that's a non-cash write-off?
Yes. I can't remember exactly what the airport advance was. And there, I think the CDA transfer over was $200 and some thousand, if I'm not mistaken. That may have been a little bit larger than the.
That's okay. Yeah, I know the airport one was about 135. So
yeah. So
yes, I'll direct this generally, maybe not just to Kevin, but for the lease accounting change, would that just be vehicles? Yeah, I don't think we have any real estate that's leased.
Kevin, would the airport land leases be affected by that new account?
yeah, I anything that you have a lease for, and I mean, do you have any water tower leases or lease any cellular towers too?
Yes.
Any of those or no?
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
we do.
Yeah, so anything that you've got, and I mean, if you could just accumulate that, and what we would like to do is probably, and when we do preliminary work, get an idea of it, and it will, I mean, for any of the governmental funds type leases, it won't affect, I think, your fund statements, but it will affect, the government-wide statements. If it's water or sewer utility or airport related, then, they follow full accrual. I mean, we outlined a little bit what the changes are in terms of the lease standard in there, but I mean, basically what's going to happen is there'll be a liability out there for any lease commitments that you have into the future. So that's probably the biggest change. So, I mean, and I think that was generated by, this started in the for-profit world, but, a lot of entities have leases, and, those things generally don't show up on, the balance sheets. And, it's like, so a community that's got a 5-year lease on a building versus a, month-to-month lease, the financials are a little bit different. So
if we're the lessor, we get a liability, and if we're the lessee on any equipment,
yeah,
does
you'll have an asset.
liabilities that affect that the allowable debt, is that factored in there now?
No, that wouldn't affect the allowable debt. I mean, the debt limit that I was talking about was the general obligation debt limit, and capital or leases don't fall into that category. That's the stuff that you use your general obligation borrowing ability for. So, so no, it won't affect that.
Are there questions for Kevin? Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, and I appreciate you accommodating us. That was very nice. So, thank you.
All right, we'll bounce back to citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject can be anything, whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of a publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, the members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in the agenda item. With that said, would anybody like to speak during citizen participation? Read all that. Somebody's got to jump up and say something. Val, I know that you'd like to participate, but we have moved past the COVID protocol, and citizen participation is done in person like it was before COVID. Sorry that we cannot accommodate the hand raised at this point. And anybody in attendance that would like to speak during citizen participation? I will close citizen participation and move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to miscellaneous business. Item number 2, presentation of draft sewer ordinance update and possible direction to staff to draft final ordinance.
Okay, there we go. Brian Raymer from Ellers here to talk about the sewer ordinance update that we went through. So this kind of relates back to the sewer rate study that was conducted in 2020. And initially, our recommendations said to include fixed costs of the system into your fixed rates of the system. That ensures revenue stability, helps you make your debt payment. And this is probably one of the bigger changes that were made, but essentially a lot of communities do this and recognize that there's a portion of administrative costs, for example, that are always going to be there regardless of if the system's used a lot or a little. So just a simple example there, but we want to make sure that our rate recommendations match the sewer ordinance. That was not necessarily true. The sewer ordinance kind of loosely indicated that generally only debt service could be recovered on a fixed basis. So we wanted to make sure that was broadened up and a little bit more explicit in terms of how the ordinance is written, that any new user kind of gets a clearer picture in terms of the expectations of the rates that they're charged. So that was one of the bigger changes. Some of the other bigger changes were just kind of cleaning it up in general. You had a lot of equations in there that a lot of communities don't use or have. It's kind of the original EPA template, to be honest, that we found in there. So we just thought there's some cleaning up that could be done in addition to some of these items for clarification, like the fixed costs. The other one was just making sure that you were undertaking some new outside user agreements. And I believe it was enacted in December of 2019. So we want to make sure that the ordinance matched those user agreements. I think historically they weren't kind of a one-to-one. I'll call it a 1 to 1.5. And we just wanted to make sure that those were kind of matching on a one-to-one basis. The biggest thing there, just understanding that you actually were allowed to charge for the fixed costs of the system to outside users per your agreements. The ordinance wasn't as explicit as that said, so it's just making sure that, once again, similar to the fixed charge for any user, that those were applicable here in both the ordinance and the user agreements. Beyond that, there was some cleaning up of kind of the residential summer allowance that's done, and making sure that's a little cleaner as you guys try to match that to how you bill and allow for kind of that monthly average to make a little lenient for water that doesn't hit all the sewer system. So it's called your summer irrigation allowance. You'll see that in there. It wasn't taken away or changed really. It was just kind of cleaned up in terms of how that language is drafted. I think that covers all the major changes. I'm trying to remember. Overall, kind of cleaning it up, though. You'll notice it's a few pages shorter.
I have a question. I don't know, Scott, did we deal with, remember that issue we had with the pool at Stanford's and that kind of water thing? Is that kind of talked about or at least dealt with? Remember the sewer problem, Jason?
We do remember that.
Okay.
We'll deal with that.
Created a policy for that,
Okay.
I'm drawing a blank, but
I'm just asking to make sure.
We actually adopted an ordinance that allowed for that change.
I think we created a policy. I don't think it's an ordinance.
There was actually a standalone agreement, as I recall it, that was created with the property owner to address that. I think there was a discussion about a policy change or an ordinance change, but the board decided that we would, one-off situation, so we would just deal with a one-off.
Yeah, the agreement was filed with the county, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
But to Forty's point, I would just want to make sure that the proposed changes in here aren't going to create a problem with that agreement on that.
Yeah, I can certainly look at that. From what I understood, though, it sounds like you're not changing anything substantive, it's just more cleaning up the language a little bit.
Correct. We didn't discuss any, pool issue in particular, so I don't think anything that, was changed here would be that. Unless somebody has a quick synopsis for me, I can probably, if it's quick.
It's not a quick synopsis. That's the reason for the concern.
Attorney Pruitt did review the ordinance, Chris, so he does have some background information. No, this is really just a draft review. I wanted, Brian to be able to present it to the board and the board to ask any questions and, then direction to, draft the final ordinance for approval.
Any other questions from anybody?
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Brian. So we'll bring this back for approval then.
All right, consideration of work orders for natural gas and electric installation in TID 4, in the, business park. Tim?
Doesn't have to cover it. I had a memo in the packet, I just have to, but, this is a separate approval because this wasn't included in the bids that were approved. That's not work that those contractors do, obviously, that's, We Energies that is electric. The total of both orders comes in at $73,237.84. For the borrowing purposes, we had estimated a total of $130,000. We're below what we had, as an estimate.
There will be a small additional for the lighting. The lighting is not included in this, and so once they have the electric designed, then they'll come out with, an additional proposal to do the lighting. But street lighting, correct.
And we did have a separate line item in our budget for street lighting as well.
Everything's buried, right? Is Spectrum running fiber or coax or any of their lines out there at the same time, since we're digging all this up? Sorry.
Spectrum, so We Energies has put out a question to Spectrum if they want to be common trench with them, and we're waiting to hear a response from Spectrum to We Energies.
Other questions?
In that case, I'll make a motion to approve the We Energies work orders for gas and electric services in
Second.
TID 4.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Right. On to consider a recommendation of Planning Commission to approve additional use application for outdoor events located at 2511 Main Street, LD's Barbecue, RA 2702-00001. Leon Davis, applicant, application 2021-09, subject to the terms stated in the draft conditional use order dated July 9th, 2021. Legal description will be updated once the required CSM is obtained and merging with the 3 adjoining properties.
Make a motion to approve the conditional use application 2021-.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. discussion direction regarding coach light at 1710 Carriage Drive.
So as you know, the village board approved that ordinance in February, to make sure that, the residents in Sterling Oaks and Lake Bluff subdivisions, their coach lamps. When we sent out the letters to those that we noticed that were defective, 1710 Carriage Drive did not even have a post and a coach lamp. The owner, as soon as he got the letter, he called Christine, that, like the fourth owner of the property. And he said he spoke to some neighbors, that have lived there, built their house there, and they said that that house has never had one. The person that built the house, Linsky gave him permission to do the electrical work. I went over there and took a look. There's no, if you look at every house in that subdivision, there's a junction box that comes out of the garage. They're on the side of the garage or on the front, and it goes underground and goes to the coach. Never had one of those installed. Pole, there's no nothing. So he said he'd love to have a coach lamp, but he can't afford one. So I contacted Belinsky, asked me to send an email to him to explain everything, and he would take it to boss, which he did. And as you saw my memo, they're saying that it's not their issue, and its responsibility would fall on the current owner. I guess that house is not on a sidewalk side, so there's no sidewalk in front of this house. Looking for direction on what way the board wants to go. When I looked at, and then Eileen gave me declaration of restrictions and then the bylaws. Linsky was in charge of this subdivision up until 2017 when they sold their last lot. They should have noticed this and made sure that this was taken care of.
Residents try to dissolve the HOA prior to then. So I don't know if Chris can.
Yeah, I mean, I read your memo today. I mean, this is a tough one, and my initial thought was that there's always discretion when it comes to enforcing these things. And you answered one of my questions, which is our concern primarily just that arguably people would be saying that there's some sort of fair enforcement if we allowed this to slide, or is it actually a safety issue? I heard you say that it's not really a safety issue. There's no sidewalk there.
Yeah, he's a non-sidewalk side, so.
Okay.
Got neighbors on each side have theirs. The only one, and
I don't know to what extent there's a technological solution here. I mean, have we reached the point where solar plus battery is adequate to kind of create the same effect rather than make them run electrical out there, or no?
Well, the ordinance says electric, so
right.
We'd have to.
I mean, if it were a different situation, if the property owner were just claiming a hardship because they couldn't, their lamp was shot and the wiring was there, I'd be much more concerned about the village saying, well, we're not going to enforce it here because that scenario is going to keep coming up. In this scenario, if there's not electrical out there, and if it's not a safety issue, I think that those are both differentiating factors that we could use to say we're not going to enforce that. Or alternatively, you could take the hard line and say this is going to be an issue that comes up. If not to this degree, it's going to come up again. People whose lamps are hot, and unfortunately, this is recorded, and it says that in lieu of public street lights, there shall be installed at the lot owner's expense in a location designed by the developer. at the time of construction of the residence building on one lot and one electrical lamp post. In lieu of public streetlights, there shall be installed at the lot owner's expense in a location designated by developer at the time of construction of the residence building on a Lot 1 outdoor electric lamp post with photoelectric. So the developer was supposed to designate the location, but it was always supposed to be the builder's cost. Developer's cost.
But in this case, though, the developer was the builder.
I thought it was a private owner.
The homeowners paid for it. You built the house, you paid.
But Polinsky was the builder.
Correct, but
They let
homeowner in the
him
end
do
pays.
the wiring, and that's
I
why.
understand, but my point I'm trying to think about, though, is that Polinsky was responsible for making sure that those coach lights got in there, correct?
Yeah, that's, I mean, that was my opinion. They should have been responsible. Or they signed off on everything with that residence. Should have had the coach light installed.
So Chris, can you look into this a little bit?
Sure.
And maybe put together what I would like to see is maybe a letter to Belinsky from our attorneys identifying that, you know, this is something that was under your watch. You should have taken care of it. It's your responsibility to,
He allowed the gentleman to do the electric work, ergo,
Well,
he should have, Polinsky allowing another quote-unquote sub in there should have, am I right, Scott, that they should have overseen that to make sure it was done properly?
yeah, that's their responsibility. That was part of the, ordinance or covenants for that subdivision. Their own covenants that they wrote. They came to us and talked to us about the coach. I really feel like it's something that falls on Belinsky. I don't want to, you know, jump in the ring again with them and that way, but I definitely want to at least hear from our attorneys identifying that maybe this is their responsibility. And
The general contractor is responsible for any and all subs.
Well, that's my question. So this was a scenario where Belinsky actually was the general. It's not like they sold the lot off and this person built it all on their own. That changes things. If nothing else, maybe the compromise is they got to run the wiring out to where the box is. Property owner has to put the lamp. Other property owners are going to have to do that eventually too as they die.
well, yeah, I know that there was a few sent letters to that. I mean, they called up and asked for extra time because they had to get an electrician in. I don't know if they have to I don't know if they replaced the post, but there were some other issues going on that they needed to solve.
well, yeah, and I think the other part to this as well is that I guarantee you charge this individual for that lamp post to gain the profit of not actually having to order it and not having to have the whole process change. Project should just simply be done.
They're in the process of putting these in development, so tack it, I mean, it's not like this is, we're asking them to come back and there's no other construction going on. They can hold it in timeline.
There's also a value then to putting this on their radar and saying, don't think about doing this again, because clearly it's going to be a problem.
I mean, is everybody okay with that? I mean, that's just my opinion on what I think should be done.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, discussion regarding department head evaluation process.
I had reminded President Seeger that, the last conversation the board had, it sounded like you wanted to doing department head evaluations to the summer months. I think that too, it was thought that it would be easier to get it in the summer months, but I don't know why we ever thought that. So I just want to have the conversation with the board, remind you guys of that, and have a general conversation. That with regular meetings, I know sometimes you've done one department head at a time. Or if you would like to have a special meeting and do it, generally what had set out to do.
I think if you slot it into budget schedule, officially, change, because I know we can spread them out, we don't have to do that, then would at least give us, that's one other reason why we opting A tied to that.
So we can space them out, have them after a regular meeting. We just want to make sure that they're done in time before we're adopting a.
I would say format, continue doing what you're doing.
I have no problem with the format.
Moving on to ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 21-06, consider a plan commission recommendation to approve potential zoning code related to adaptive reuse of institutional buildings in the residential areas with the change of the language in the section 510-253 of consistent to compatible.
Make a motion that we approve ordinance 2021-06, revisions to the zoning regulation in chapter 510 of the Village of East Troy Municipal Code.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
So does the planning commission then have to still approve a decision to confirm that it is compatible? How is that?
It's a per case basis.
We do something called a plan development, and it has to be. They will determine if they.
Okay, and is this applicable to just established buildings, or what about like the Burns lot?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, ordinance 2021-07, consider plan commission recommendation to approve potential amendment to the zoning code related to building demolition in the downtown design district.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-07.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one quick question. Will this affect the recent, raise order that, or raise, I shouldn't say order, raise permit that?
The application's already been filled out, right?
Correct, it goes by application.
I thought, just wanted to be sure.
Any other discussion? Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 2021-18, consider preliminary special assessment resolution declaring intent to exercise special assessment powers for improvements in the general vicinity of the Main Street, Church Street, and Village Square.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2021-18.
Second that.
Discussion?
The only question I have is some of these properties are not for profits. We can still. I didn't, that worked, so.
Other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to reports. Verbal update on Main Street Square project, Church Street.
Okay, not much of an update today. Things have kind of come to a grinding halt. Still no fire hydrants. They're supposed to ship from, Alabama on Friday. I can tell you the contractor was informed this morning that they need to do a better job with dust control, so they're, working on a plan for that. They did, put down water today to help with that situation. Other than that, there isn't much to report at this time.
Up.
Sure hope so, 'cause we're gonna lose a few weeks to this fire hydrant situation. The contractor did bring up an extension of time, which we quickly said, yeah, we're not gonna talk about that at this point because you've got plenty of time left. So I don't know where that's gonna go. It's gonna depend on Mother Nature and, you know, just how the rest of the project goes.
The reason for the delay on the fire hydrants?
So it's just simply a supply issue, the construction of them at the factory.
You see any other materials that might take a little bit longer?
It seems as if everything else, I think, has been delivered. I don't know, it literally is just the fire hydrants. I think that the rest of the materials, as far as, the utility stuff which is the major holdup, is available.
Do we have another option for going hydrants somewhere else?
I've tried multiple, other avenues. I've tried to coax the contractor into, you know, trying to find hydrants, I mean, I've been making phone calls, and there is truly a shortage.
You were also told that the contractor couldn't get the correct color for the, TIF district too. So on that project, the hydrants were an issue as well, but they were able to get some and they're painting them like.
Correct.
Replacing the existing?
Correct.
So you
On new water main.
just cap them off and you're good?
No. So they ran, actually, all the water main itself is in, the Ts were installed, but in order to do our testing, the hydrants need to be installed.
Then that's why you don't wanna forward with any of the work, 'cause if you gotta dig it out, then
That's correct. The contractor doesn't wanna move forward with, let's say, doing storm sewer pipe, which is shallower, because then they're gonna have to go around and dig around that to go back to do all the hydrants and the water services once the new water main has been tested and can be in service.
So let's say that they get shipped Friday, get up here hopefully early next week, and how long to get the hydrants in?
It'll be probably a couple of weeks to get hydrants in, and then, testing can occur, and then they'll have to go back and start doing individual services to the properties onto the new water main, moving them over. Correct. And pressure tests.
Would we be within our rights asking the contractor to give us his alternate plan if the hydrants if they're just not gonna get there? 'Cause I've seen companies promise stuff before and it never gets there. I'm in that situation myself. So I guess, are we looking at this to say, what do we do if they don't show up?
Don't have any options without fire hydrants.
We can't put the old ones back in?
I mean, there's probably a few we could reuse, but that's probably not the best way to spend our money.
I understand that, but then again, I just didn't wanna sit with this out in December, January either.
Is there any concrete work that they could be doing on the square or things like that?
So we had that discussion. Unfortunately, there's also storm sewer on the square that needs to happen, and, they said, okay, we can go in and start doing all the removals on the square, and then, maybe shift back to pipe, and it's like, I don't even wanna touch the square until we know we can dedicate our time to the square. Because if we go in and tear out a major portion of that, and then, we start moving around, things could be worse than they are today. And I just don't wanna get in that situation.
People have torches and pitchforks coming up to the village hall.
All right, airport manager's quarterly report. Walter, are you remote?
Might not have felt he had to be here.
I had a couple questions when you get.
So, do you have questions about the quarterly report?
Yes.
I think that we should table the quarterly report until Walter can get here for our next meeting.
Not a problem.
I agree with that.
I will ask him to attend the next meeting.
So I'll make a motion to table the quarterly report.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Update on outstanding 2021 personal property taxes.
I have $30.
Yep, sorry, I'm sorry. This is just so that you knew where we stood on collecting the 2020 personal property taxes. None of the outstanding ones qualify for chargeback, so.
This doesn't include what's due at the end of the month for anybody who's doing partial payments.
Oh, you mean for the airport? No, it does not, because they have till the end of this month. Because that's a little bit different. These are just the regular personal properties. We are still assessing them penalties. I have contacted by phone one of them. The other one I've been trying to mail to multiple places, and the third I've been trying to track down the parent company with no response.
Property can't be split. Anytime it can is because that's
Any questions on the June financial reports?
I have one for Jason on the, expenditures for the, fund summary. This was for the fire protection outlay. There was quite a bit. Was that because of that truck deal that we forwarded money for?
correct, because we accumulate the funds over several years for that, so it looks like we were over budget because we budgeted for that in prior years.
How about the 2021 second quarterly police report? Any questions?
Status of some of our challenging.
I don't know if anybody's noticed that house on the corner of North. Hired somebody to put up stuff. Needs to be done with that by Wednesday. I think. The issue that I have with it, and I don't think we're going to be able to do anything about it, is when he came to court that night, he told the judge, I have all the supplies. I think he's had that tin roof sitting in his garage for years and years and years, because parts of it are rusted. That's going up there. It's orange when it should be blue. I don't know if anybody's noticed that. I mentioned something to Scott Johnson, and he said he was going to take years, yeah. So,
And I know one of the barns out on 120 was.
no, that has not been taken down. We want Scott to go over there and take another look at it. Sure that it needs to come. They said that they don't have the money to. Fire department, I don't think they want to go that route either. We want to make sure before we make them use it, I guess. I think it looks worse than it did last year.
From Mr. Stiza.
He actually answered his phone when Chelsea called him because he accidentally turned the water back onto the house. Answered the phone for her. Nothing from us.
You said they turned the water back on?
Accidentally.
Oh,
The contractor hit the water valve in the front yard when they were doing restoration, and it turned the water on, and the meter called to say that there was water leaking.
Where is that at? Yeah, I'm just curious.
Main Street.
2954. Red brick house, porch, kind of in the middle between Beulah and Park.
It's
Next to
it's next
on
door
the
to the
north
house
side.
on Main Street with the horseshoe driveway.
How about, draft planning commission minutes from 7/12? Any questions? Questions on the library board minutes from 6/8? Make a motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985 1E to conduct other specified business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Amendment to the property sale agreement, with Overlook Ridge LLC and an East Troy Area Emergency Services Agreement. And Wisconsin statute 1985 1G to confer with legal counsel for government body, who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to adopt by the body with respect to litigation which is likely to become involved 2019 sidewalk project. Roll call? Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we'll have to start over. Are we still recording? Do we still need to use these?